The CoinDesk Spotlight is brought to you by Nexo, the place to earn on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and more.
As part of CoinDesk's most influential, CoinDesk had the opportunity to interview one of the winners, Strike CEO Jack Mallers, whose mission to bank the unbanked has led him to spread Bitcoin adoption across El Salvador. Joining us now to discuss is CoinDesk Chief Insights columnist David Morris. Good morning there, David. So you had the opportunity to interview
Morning,
Jack.
Christine.
Good morning. What were your overall impressions of him?
Well, I think like many Bitcoiners, Jack is extremely passionate and really, feels everything that's happening as significant. And obviously what he's done is a pretty big deal. Our most influential list is not ranked, but in my book, he's pretty close to the top for this year. He's a very energetic guy. He had a lot to say and we had a great conversation.
Awesome. Let's hear the interview.
Oh, man, I'm humbled by it all. Let me tell you something. A few years ago, no one really cared about what I had to say. So I'm humbled by it all. This is exciting. I'm really proud of where this whole industry is. But all that to say, I'm a pleb. Forever a pleb, always will be a pleb. I don't think of myself as an influencer whatsoever. But I really appreciate it. It's exciting. And let's do the damn thing.
Well, so that I think is a very healthy attitude. And the one way that we saw it manifested was at Bitcoin Miami 2021. You were making the big announcement about the new policy in El Salvador, and you got very choked up. You got very emotional. So I want to start there. What was the moment like for you? What did that mean? And why was it so powerful?
Oh, man, it was a combination of a lot of stuff. First and foremost, I find Bitcoin as one of the more powerful tools in human history in instilling basic human freedom and financial inclusion. And albeit the very tiny part I played in this story, in that moment, I knew the gravity and the weight and the progressive step, in my opinion, that humanity was taking. This was one of the bigger developments in macroeconomics and in emerging markets in probably the last 250 years. And I felt the weight and the gravity of it. And it's the most important thing I've ever been a part of and likely ever will be.
What does this mean for Bitcoin? This is a big step, obviously. But what do you see kind of the implications? Does this unleash other changes for Bitcoin and adoption in the near term, medium term? What do you think the impact is for Bitcoin?
Thanks, huge. First and foremost, Bitcoin works. I've been around long enough where that wasn't necessarily always the case. Bitcoin works. Bitcoin's always been an opt-in system. It's never been demanded of anyone to use. But if you find value in opting out of any central bank currency, any monetary policy that's imposed on you, any payment processor that you don't agree with, you can opt in to a distributed network. I mean, you can't discount the innovation that's there. And so I think we're going to start to see the network be used for things like remittance, payment processing, financial inclusion. And so I think this is the first chapter in one of the more scalable, sizable demonstrations of Bitcoin working. Mm-hmm. And I think we all know and are all familiar in this industry. If Bitcoin works, it's always been a binary bet. If Bitcoin works, it's going to change the world. It's going to dematerialize money as we know it, or it's going to zero. And I think this was the latest chapter, and it looks like this thing's going to work. It looks like it's not going to zero, and it looks like it's financial asset, and anything it touches, it's really going to swallow up and just destroy. So,
I mean, the bond in particular, and you've mentioned the IMF, the bond seems to be a significant, I would say, threat to established global financial institutions, including the World Bank. And El Salvador is also engaged in what looks like de-dollarization. So there's a certain threat to the dollar implied here. Do you think this move is going to sharpen hostility to Bitcoin amongst traditional financial authorities? Is there going to be more pushback now?
Let me tell you something. I actually just presented at the IMF, and this is what I told them. The G20 and the UN have a mandate of lowering the average cost of remittance and cross-border payments to 5%. And it is because we know low-wage workers, immigrants, refugees are reliant on sending money back home to smaller markets. As basic human beings, we're all trying to make the world a better place. And so I see Bitcoin as not a requirement. Bitcoin is not tattooed on my forehead. I don't have Bitcoin flowing through my veins. I'm a human being that wants to leave the world a better place than when I joined it. And I think Bitcoin is the best tool we've ever developed in allowing us to do that. And so my message to the IMF and to the World Bank when I talk to them is exactly that. It's an opt-in system, and El Salvador is using it to improve the quality of their lives. So what? If it was a hammer, if it was a nail, or if it's Bitcoin, it's just a tool. And if you have a problem with someone improving the quality of their lives and their citizens, then I have a problem with you.
You've described El Salvador as the first step for Strike. What's the next step?
We have a lot of plans. I mean, we're going to launch in a ton more emerging markets. I think the ability to have a monetary network that's inclusive to all 8 billion people is a very powerful concept that no one's fully understood. And then I also think that there are a lot of developed market plays to be had. I think that you're talking about a monetary network that can process payments for free. There's no reason a merchant should be paying any MDR. And there's a really awesome consumer experience for us to develop. So we're trying to build the best consumer experience in the world. We want people to get access to Bitcoin for free in many ways. We want merchants to be able to accept payments from thousands of different issuers with no MDR. And we want everyone in emerging markets to have the same economic stability and opportunity that everyone here in the United States has. And so step by step, more countries, more features, more products. But we're just getting started.
All right, David, what an interview. He's quite a personality, a pleb, as he likes to say, but a fun one. Is there any sense of what the challenges ahead will be for Strike? You know, there was a lot of rah Bitcoin, but, you know, Bitcoin is in itself not perfect. So did you get a sense of what challenges he'll have ahead?
Sort of two different questions, and one is the El Salvador program itself, which, as Jack was clear about in the interview, Strike is not directly involved in the actual rollout, so making sure that the Chivo wallet and things like that work. On the other side, Strike as a company, I think that there's a question of whether there are going to be other national leaders who are interested in doing the same thing that El Salvador has done. It remains to be seen. I think it's more of a question mark than a challenge, but it'll emerge over the next, I think, probably 6 months. We'll get a clear picture of how much uptake there will be for this among people who are, not naive Bukele. There was definitely interest in other countries, but it remains to be seen whether that'll play out.
Hold on a second. There.
We hear you now.
Great. Do you think that the fact that you had Bukele as pretty much the first national leader of a country adopt Bitcoin as a currency, and you have the likes of Jack Mallers supporting it, going all out and saying what a great thing this is, that it sort of clouds the judgment about the leader himself, in terms of what they do in other policy realms? In other words, is the Bitcoin community and the people like Jack a little too enthusiastic about Bukele, perhaps even for their own good?
Well, I'll say this. I think that it is important to keep in mind that we already have a particular political context when we look at somebody like Bukele, who is taking the reins of an economy in a country that, frankly, has been abused by the United States and the Western world for decades. A lot of the political instability in their background that has led to some of the actions he's had to take is the result of interference by Western powers. And so when we look at something like Bitcoin as an alternative to being enmeshed in that system, that's an important context for some of the characterizations that have been made of him as a leader. And I don't come down clearly on one side or the other, but I do think it's a lot more complicated than the mainstream press would probably like you to believe in some cases.